Hey guys, welcome back to Ragman Reviews. Today I've got something really special in store for you guys. I know I said I was going to take a break from making big videos like this after my 7-hour review of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, but I've stumbled across something truly special here, and you know me, I just couldn't resist, so here we go again. Reading the title of this video, you might have been thinking, who in the world is Garth Marenghi, and what the hell is his Darkplace? This is a pretty obscure little show I've discovered here, but trust me when I say it'll be worth it, because Garth Marenghi's Darkplace is possibly the worst TV show I've ever seen, and that's no exaggeration. So to give you guys a bit of a primer here before we really jump into it, all you need to know is that Garth Marenghi's Darkplace is a horror series, although to be fair, it ends up being more funny than it is scary, about the doctors and patients of a spooky hospital rife with spooky supernatural phenomena. Apparently, even Channel 4, the network the show was originally produced by in the 1980s, realised how bad the show was because they never even aired it at the time. It was only eventually released in 2004. But the only version of the show that's available to watch now is this weird hybrid documentary version of the show, where the episodes are intercut with these like talking head bits where the actors and creators of the show discuss the episodes and some behind the scenes stuff, which obviously does not really help with the viewer's immersion into the storylines of the episodes that were already pretty terrible to begin with. The person we see the most of is the titular Garth Marenghi, who I guess was this semi-popular horror fiction writer who somehow was given permission to make an entire TV show. And I really do hope they fired whoever made that decision, because this guy is so full of himself. He has absolutely no self-awareness and genuinely thinks that this show is some kind of groundbreaking, revolutionary work of art. But it's not. It's terrible.
Back in the 1980s, I wrote, directed and starred in Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, a television programme so radical, so risky, so dangerous, so goddamn crazy, that the so-called powers that be became too scared to show it, and jipped me.
As you can already see from the credit sequence alone, this show is really cheesy and is full of bad effects and terrible acting. The first episode starts with this character named Liz making her way into the hospital, and I kid you not, the very first thing that happens is that she strokes a cat. First of all, why the hell is there a cat in a hospital? And then the cat telepathically tells her to leave, and in response to that, she just says this.
Just leave.
Funny. That cat just told me to leave.
She then goes to reception and inquires about the doctor's job that she wants to apply for. That's right, just the doctor's job. And she starts listing her credentials to this random guy at the reception, and he's like, "Yep, you're hired. I'm pretty sure that's not how you apply for a job as a doctor at a hospital."
Hi, I've come to apply for the doctor's job. I can assure you my credentials are top-notch. I've just graduated from Harvard College, Yale. I aced every semester and I got an A.
Well, that sounds excellent. Our last doctor only just recently died in horrific circumstances. Can you start immediately?
What the hell does that even mean? Why would he say that? I understand this is supposed to be a horror series, and with the telepathic cat and the information about the previous doctor dying horrifically, they're trying to set up how spooky the hospital is, but surely there's a better way to do it. It's like every single line of dialogue completely shatters your suspension of disbelief. If you want to scare the viewer, they have to actually believe what's going on is actually going on. If they don't take the situation seriously, they can't empathize with the characters and become immersed in the situation. But even beyond the dialogue, there's just something really off about the way the show is directed. I mean, look at the way this scene is shot. I don't know what you would call this kind of framing in filmmaking lingo, but it just looks so amateurish, you know? Like, why is there so much space above their heads? And if all that wasn't bad enough, now Dr. Sanchez arrives and the scene gets even more ridiculous. And this is still the very first scene, so I think at this point you can tell why this video is 3 hours long. Oh boy. If I asked you to guess what the first thing that comes out of Dr. Sanchez's mouth is, and I gave you 1,000 guesses, I'm pretty sure you would never get the right answer. Literally the first thing he says to Liz is this.
I'm Dr. Sanchez. You're a woman.
You're a woman. Dude, what the hell is this show, man? What am I doing? But it doesn't stop there. This is what she replies to that.
You're a woman.
Yes, I hope that's not a problem.
Not at all. There's plenty of scale on the wall. This is the 20th century after all, though some don't like to admit it. Welcome to Darkplace, Liz.
I understand this was originally made in the 80s, so a lot of the gender stuff in the show feels a bit outdated, but this dialogue just seems so unrealistic to me. But obviously realism wasn't really a concern for the creators of this show, because what happens next is that Dr. Sanchez shakes Liz's hand and then proceeds to, well, I don't even know how to explain this, to be honest.
My hand.
And no, I did not edit that clip. That's actually what happens in the show. Jesus fucking Christ, man. Why am I doing this to myself? I think I'm gonna need a pretty strong drink to finish this one.
Are you all right?
Not really.
Alright guys, welcome to the Patreon exclusive stream. I've got some big announcements to make today, some catching up to do. A bit of a weird one really. A lot of you probably know that I've been working on this new really big video for a couple weeks. I haven't really told anyone what the video was on. It's actually about this really obscure old British TV show called Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. This really, really bad horror show that, well, I say it's really bad, but that's kind of the problem, really. So I've been working on this review of this show, right, but I had to stop editing it because, actually, I was telling my friend Jack about it, and it turned out that my friend Jack had actually knew about the show and he had seen it before, and he told me something that really just stopped me right in my tracks, because he said that the show is actually a joke, basically. The show actually isn't from the 80s. It's not a real show. It's like, well, it's really weird and confusing to explain, but the show was made to seem like it was an old show or whatever, and it was made to seem like it was bad on purpose, but it isn't. It's like a prank. The show is intentionally bad, basically. It was made that way on purpose. Well, that's what my friend said anyway. And like, to be honest, after looking into it for a bit, it seems like that's the general, consensus on it, that it is bad on purpose. But obviously I didn't actually realize that when I was watching it, because it does just look like a really bad old TV show. But yeah, apparently all the mistakes, like all the bad acting and directing and story writing and all that is actually all done on purpose to make fun of bad shows, I guess. At least that's how I understand it now. So you can see the problem I'm having at the moment, guys. I don't really know what to do now because I've written this whole script and I've already edited the first section of the video, and it would be a bit of a bummer for all this work to go to waste, So actually I had this idea that I told my friend Jack about, right? I think it's a really good idea. I told him that, what if, seeing as the show was made to be bad on purpose, what if I actually released this video as if it was bad on purpose as well, because that's what the show is doing. So it's like I'm doing the same thing the show's doing, but as a YouTube video, I'm making this video shitting on this bad show, even though the show's bad on purpose, but I'm doing it in a way that, I'm also doing that on purpose, and I even thought about releasing it on, April Fool's. I thought that would be a good April Fool's joke video, But he said that doesn't make any sense because I didn't make it bad on purpose. I just missed the point of the show. I just didn't get it. He was saying that I didn't miss the point of the show on purpose, basically. So it wouldn't make sense for me to pretend that my video was made to be bad on purpose, if that makes sense. And, he has a point, but I didn't want to waste all this time and effort. So I said to him, and I think this kind of stumped him, to be honest. I said to him, well, how do you know that the creators of Garth Marenghi's Darkplace didn't start out making a show they thought was good and only turned it into this, quote-unquote bad on purpose kind of thing when they realized it was bad? Like, how can you know that for sure? And to be honest, he didn't really have an answer for that. He just said it was obvious, it was made to be bad on purpose. But clearly it's not that obvious, is it? Because I didn't pick up on that, and, I'm sure there's plenty of other people who didn't either, because how would you know unless you were told? It's not that obvious, it just looks like a bad show. And he didn't really say anything after that, so I think I made a good point there. Yeah. Oh yeah, by the way, so I did a Patreon stream last week where I talked about, that Garth Marenghi video I was working on, and, how I realized it was actually bad on purpose and all that, which, I didn't realize at first. And loads of people were calling me an idiot for not noticing it was, for not noticing the show was intentionally bad. And, that's fucking bullshit, man. I mean, you guys, like, obviously it's easy for you guys to say because, wait, let me get this. Because it's easy for you guys to say because you know now, right? Like, I didn't know going into it, but if you went into the show not knowing what the creators' intentions were, you wouldn't be able to tell. Like, it's really hard to tell. It just looks like a bad show. Obviously hindsight's 20/20, innit? Like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's easy for you to say that now and make me look like an idiot, but I don't see how you could possibly know what the creator's intentions were without someone telling you first. And in fact, I know this for a fact because after the stream, I was reading all these comments and stuff, and it made me actually kind of interested in looking into this whole thing a bit more. And so I started Googling some stuff, doing some reading, and I came across this. People talking about this essay by this French guy. It's called Death of the Author, and it's about how we can't really talk about the author's intentions, and we can't really make like a book or something, like a work of art, out to be just about what the author wanted it to be, and it's more about how the audience receives it and thinks about it and stuff. So obviously I'm not the only one who thinks you can't really know about the author's intentions and all that when we watch a movie or a TV show or whatever. So and that's a French philosopher saying that, so not so stupid now, am I? If even the French philosophers agree with me. But anyway, reading that actually kind of got me going down a bit of a rabbit hole, so I'm probably going to try and read some more philosophical stuff about art and stuff, because it's actually pretty interesting. There's a lot of things you don't really think about too much, things you kind of take for granted about how we think about art and talk about art and all that. So yeah, I definitely want to look into that a bit more, to be honest. Okay guys, I know it's been a month since I was supposed to release a video, but I've been doing some reading, and I feel like I really need to get to the bottom of this, because there's been a lot of debates going on about, I brought up the death of the author and all that, but to be honest, it goes so much deeper than the death of the author. I mean, obviously already 20 years before Bart wrote Death of the Author, Wimsatt and Beardsley published The Intentional Fallacy, which is a great window into the kind of debates surrounding the position of the author and the author's intentions in the critic's assessment of a work. So this was not a new concern that suddenly emerged, with the post-structuralists and the deconstructionists and whatnot. This debate has been around for a while, and Wimsatt and Beardsley sought to kind of dispute the position that a work of art is to be measured up to the author's intentions in making the work. That is, the idea that it is the critic's job to assess the intention and judge the work accordingly. In The Intentional Fallacy, they cite the critic Elmer Edgar Stoll to illustrate this position, when he writes, "Is not a critic a judge who does not explore his own consciousness, but determines the author's meaning or intention, as if the poem were a will, a contract, or the Constitution?" Contrary to this position, and similarly to Barth, the authors of The Intentional Fallacy contend that the poem belongs to the public, not to the author or the critic. They write that it is detached from the author at birth and goes about the world beyond his power to intend about it or control it. So instead, Wimsatt and Beardsley and the school of the so-called new critics sought after a more kind of objective sort of criticism, which treated the work as its own aesthetic object, separate from, in the critic's study of it, separate from the biographical and historical circumstances of its author. They write, "The design or intention of the author is neither available nor desirable as a standard for judging the success of a work of literary art." And then, much of William Empson's work, another writer often associated with the new critics, although he would certainly not agree with that association, much of Empson's work, and specifically his book 7 Types of Ambiguity, deals with, as the title suggests, the ambiguity of poetic language, not just for the reader, but also the poet himself as he composes the poem. Empson believes that certain literary devices point to a fundamental division in the author's mind, an uncertainty, and naturally for the reader, that poetry divides itself even further, offering an almost inexhaustible array of possible interpretations and variations. And needless to say, at its core, this is a hermeneutical problem, right? This is what hermeneutics is all about. How do we interpret a text or anything, a work of art, a speech act? How do we derive meaning? How do we locate meaning in a work? And of course, hermeneutics as a discipline is rooted in philology and biblical hermeneutics, but it really takes shape with the German Romantics, notably Schleiermacher, who built on Herder's ideas concerning language. Schleiermacher distinguished between 2 aspects of interpretation, the linguistic and the psychological. Linguistic interpretation refers to the rules governing the words employed in a given text, and derives meaning from their usage, whereas psychological interpretation refers to the author's intentions. According to Schleiermacher, the reason why we need to examine the author's psychology to infer meaning is because of the profound distinctiveness of individuals, and the ambiguity produced by this distinctiveness, that an understanding of the common usage of words may not fully capture. Basically, we need to know what is distinct about an individual, what is individual about an author, to know how their use of these words may differ from other people's use of those words. And this hermeneutical tradition then trickles down through German philosophy and is expounded upon by thinkers like Dilthey, Heidegger, and Gadamer, who is perhaps the greatest 20th century representative of this particular field of hermeneutics. And Gadamer attempts to distance himself from the understanding of interpretation as simply the recovery of the author's intention, seeing a reader's engagement with a text as something akin to what he calls a fusion of horizons. But then we have someone like Wolfgang Iser, who focuses specifically on what is termed reader response theory. Iser believed that meaning was not an object to be found in the text, rather meaning was created in the space between the reader and the text. For Iser, the reader activates the textual structures of the work as they converge within one's imagination. In his essay The Reading Process, a phenomenological approach, he explains the process of reading and interpreting the meaning of a text like this. The impressions that arise as a result of this process will vary from individual to individual, but only within the limits imposed by the written as opposed to the unwritten text. In the same way, 2 people gazing at the night sky may both be looking at the same collection of stars, but one will see the image of a plough and the other will make out a dipper. The stars in a literary text are fixed, the lines that join them are variable. And interestingly, we find some of these hermeneutical concerns echoed in the analytic tradition of 20th century philosophy. For example, in the problem of radical translation or radical interpretation, which we find discussed in the theories of language and theories of meaning developed by the likes of Donald Davidson and Willard Quine. So I came across this really fascinating film, this short film by Peter Greenaway called Vertical Features Remake. The film is kind of complicated, but it's supposedly a reconstruction of a partial film made by a guy called Tulse Looper. Tulse Looper is, of course, an invention of Greenaway's, as is the IRR, the Institute of Restoration and Reclamation, which is the organisation in charge of finishing this film and reconstructing it.
The Institute of Reclamation and Restoration are steadily examining and reappraising the papers of Tulse Looper. It is hoped eventually to make a complete and definitive reconstruction of his research.
What we then get is 4 different versions of this film, called Vertical Features, each incorporating different ideas from various people concerning the problem of what Tulse Looper actually intended the film to look like. And as the film progresses, we hear about these debates that occurred surrounding the work and the different agendas of those involved, the different interpretations of the materials left behind. Materials that quite literally are just footage of vertical features in the world. Vertical Features Remake comedically exposes the constructed nature of the work. There is no real origin, no real author.
Castanei declared that the photographs that were supposed to be of Tulse Looper were in fact photographs of the film editor's father-in-law. Rastolin doubted the very existence of Tulse Looper and made a film called The Ubiquitous Wolf, which suggested that Tulse Looper was a figment of the Institute's imagination, invented so that the IRR could undertake a project which was no more than an academic film editing exercise.
The film is made up of different agendas, different interpretations, modifications. The work of art is a slippery thing, and the film points out how the background we are given, the presuppositions we make about the work and its intentions, colour our vision of the work, our interpretation of the images which in themselves tell us nothing of the sort. The schema, the system, the logic and methodology of the construction are imprinted onto the image. They hide the actual image, distract us from the image, they cover it up. In a broader sense, the film is also clearly satirizing how certain works of art, or even any object of study, becomes the subject of, different schools of study and interpretation. How fields of research form around these objects, pulling them in different directions, and the academic feuds that emerge in these contexts.
But having no clear idea of the total sound conception, we have conceived our own, trying to follow the spirit of his experiment. We make no claim that this film reproduces the film Tulse Looper made, or would make now if given the opportunity again, though we believe it is made in the direction of his inquiry.
And I think that Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire similarly kind of satirizes the process of interpretation, biased interpretation, specifically that of the critic. In fact, the very format of this novel lends itself to misinterpretation or confusion. The book is composed of a fictional author's poem and a critic and supposed former friend of that poet's commentary on the poem. The narrator even suggests how we should go about reading the text, and in what order.
My foreword has been, I trust, not too skimpy. Other notes, arranged in a running commentary, will certainly satisfy the most voracious reader. Although those notes, in conformity with custom, come after the poem, the reader is advised to consult them first, and then study the poem with their help, rereading them, of course, as he goes through its text, and perhaps, after having done with the poem, consulting them a third time, so as to complete the picture. I find it wise, in such cases as this, to eliminate the bother of back-and-forth leafings by either cutting out and clipping together the pages with the text of the thing, or, even more simply, purchasing 2 copies of the same work, which can then be placed in adjacent positions on a comfortable table.
So, to quickly get back to Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, I think I've demonstrated pretty conclusively that you're all wrong. Actually, I'm not stupid for not realizing it was quote-unquote bad on purpose, because that doesn't make any sense. There's no such thing. The text is what I say it is. End of story.
Let me state that, without my notes, Shade's text simply has no human reality at all. Since the human reality of such a poem as his, being too skittish and reticent for an autobiographical work, with the omission of many pithy lines carelessly rejected by him, has to depend entirely on the reality of its author, and his surroundings, attachments, and so forth, a reality that only my notes can provide. To this statement, my dear poet would probably not have subscribed, but, for better or worse, it is the commentator who has the last word.